Happy Tuesday morning to everyone. Hope everyone's day is already starting out on the right foot, right track. Everything is going positive. This is the Kitchings Table, and I'm your host, Earl Kitchings. Always glad to be with you here on Tuesday mornings at 10 a.m. on Awesome Radio, WBISLP 106.9 FM, YouTube, Roku, GPAC 23, and of course, Facebook Live are the other platforms you can catch the show. And we hope that today's show will give you some information that will make you a much more in tune and enlightened individual. Aside from what happened yesterday in Mar-a-Lago, Florida, that's going to be what it's going to be. So FBI, Department of Justice, do your thing. But today, before we get into what our show topic is, I got a little history question for you, a little history quiz. So what year were African Americans, blacks in America, granted citizenship in the United States? What year? Shouldn't be too hard of a question, being that the Civil War was in the 1860s, so it shouldn't be too difficult. If you guess 1868, you would be correct. Blacks were granted citizenship. Didn't grant them the right to vote, though. Just granted them citizenship in 1868. However, in 1870, the 15th Amendment to the United States Constitution was drawn up, and it prohibits the federal government and each state from denying or abridging a citizen's right to vote on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. The 15th Amendment, keep that in mind. You have the right to vote as a citizen of the United States, no matter what your race, color, creed, religion, it does not matter. You are guaranteed the right to vote. Here's the caveat to that, though. For Black Americans, that didn't always stand up. Almost 100 years later, it took the Voting Rights Act. The 15th Amendment prohibits a citizen the right to vote. However, the people in charge of the country and the voting and things of that nature found ways to get around the 15th Amendment. So it was not until 1965, under former President Lyndon B. Johnson, the vice president of John F. Kennedy, but Lyndon B. Johnson stepped into that role after the assassination of President Kennedy, and then had one full term on his own. But in 1965, on August the 6th, 1965, so just think that some 67 years ago, on August 6th, President Johnson signed into law the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and it outlawed the discriminatory voting practices adopted in many southern states after the Civil War, including literacy tests as a prerequisite for voting. A literacy test, meaning, can you read and can you write? Well, if you deny me the opportunity to read and to learn how to write, how can I be literate? But once we got the opportunity to learn, and that's why our grandparents and our parents and our great-grandparents, even today, parents, you need to understand the importance and the emphasis of your child learning how to read and write. Understand this too about the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Again, it was signed into law on August 6, 1965, and it outlawed the discriminatory voting practices. So the 15th Amendment says if you're a citizen, you can vote. It doesn't matter what your race, color, religion, whatever. It doesn't matter. However, do understand this one fact. It's not blaring out. And I found this out some 30 years ago. If Congress does not sign off on the renewal of the Voting Rights Act, whenever it comes up before Congress to renew it, if Congress does not vote to move that act forward, listen to what I'm saying. If that Voting Rights Act, see, it's not an amendment, it's just a Voting Rights Act. If it is not signed into law again on the years that it is supposed to be signed off on, Black people will lose their right to vote. So understand that in 2022, going forward to 2024 for the next presidential election, I'm not sure, and I should have looked this up. If Congress does not sign off on this act, and it's sad that it has to be a recurring thing, that it has to get a sign off every so many years. If we're approaching that time and they don't sign off, and you can see how things are going at this time. If they're pushing back on abortion rights, if they're pushing back on citizen rights, if they're pushing back on anything that has to do with the citizenship of this country having rights, this is going to happen. They're going to find a way to not sign off on it. Now, the president and the Democratic Party can fight to make sure that this happens, but we must understand that these things are possible. So that's our history lesson for today here on the Kitchings Table. Hope it brought some enlightenment to you. And if you don't quite take stock in what I'm telling you, go look it up for yourself. Go look it up for yourself, and then understand what time it is in your particular city, county, state. This is becoming a very crucial thing here in America right now. Democracy or autocracy. The people in charge, we the people, or a select group of we the people will be in charge. Which one do you want? With autocracy, you're going to lose out on many, many freedoms that you have or rights that you have, because people want to make sure that certain individuals in this country don't have rights. You see it coming, get out and vote, register to vote, turn the tide on this thing, and stop these people from telling all these lies on a regular basis. It is just unbelievable. When I was growing up, man, if you told this many tales to an adult, oh my goodness. So it's just sad that people in charge who call themselves the honorable. You ever notice that people in politics who hold office are always given the title the honorable representative, or the honorable senator, or the honorable mayor, or the honorable city council person, or the honorable school board member, whatever. Honorable, yet you tell people vicious stories, lies, and alternative facts to suit your betterment. How is that honorable? How can they teach their children truth and honesty when they fight so vehemently for lack of truth and honesty and transparency? Hypocrisy and a double-edged sword. Understand that. So today on our show, our title is To the Polls. To the Polls. So I want to talk today about the gerrymandering. And then when I get to our pantry segment of our show, That segment is called the urban versus rural divide. And I'm going to enlighten you with something to help you understand why that fine line, thick line, whichever one you want to call it, will continue to be deciding who's on what side of the fence or whether or not you're straddling the fence. So let's jump into this. So what is gerrymandering? Because we hear about states and representatives of states and politicians wanting to change boundaries to suit and fit themselves or their parties or whomever, so they'll have an advantage. Now, could be another term for when they do this, and it was a term that my dad was vehemently opposed to saying. However, in this content, this would probably be a good time to say the C word. Cheating. You can say that gerrymandering borderlines on folks attempting to cheat, to line it up their way so they can have the advantage. Isn't it interesting that on Friday nights, Saturdays, and Sundays, when we have the most amount of sports being played in America, that we are warning everyone who is playing between the lines not to have an advantage or to cheat. But when it comes to between the lines of politics, I want to gerrymander my way into office. So gerrymandering in representative democracies is the political manipulation of electoral district boundaries with the intent of creating undue advantage for a party, group, or socio-economic class. Gerrymandering, the political manipulation of electoral district boundaries being created for an undue advantage. Undue advantage. Okay, well, let's use that term instead of the cheat word. So when someone is doing something to get an advantage, they're just having an undue advantage. So when someone is taking advantage of doing things at a disadvantage, that's just an undue advantage. We won't say they're cheating. In gerrymandering, they may seek to help one party win extra seats, which is called a partisan gerrymander. Many incumbents of both parties are safer, which is an incumbent protection gerrymander, or target particular incumbents who have fallen out of favor. It doesn't matter, as The Rock would say, it doesn't matter. If you are trying to get this advantage, then you are trying to have an undue advantage, gerrymandering. So reasonable goals will always be in conflict, such as the more districts are designed to be compact and maintain county voting lines, the more likely they are to be safe for one party. So the more districts that are designed to give someone an undue advantage, the safer it is for that party. They're going to have more seats. The more districts are designed to be competitive, the more likely that representation will be distorted, which means if there are 10 seats and one party gets 9 of those seats, representation is distorted. It's an imbalance. And then finally, the more competitive a state makes its House districts, the more other states gain power in Congress by protecting their incumbents. And this is what is happening in today's time as we deal with the elections in 2022. One party is seeking to have a distinct advantage over other parties, to draw the lines differently so they can have more seats than the other. They're in control. They want to fix it so they stay in control, and there's no balance. There's no equity. There's no equalness. There's no just way for there to be a balance between all the people. They want an undue advantage. So here's some key facts. Fewer competitive U.S. House districts and safe incumbents are after redistricting. In 2010, 70 of 435 U.S. House districts had a competitive partisan balance of 47 to 53%. But after redistricting in 2011, that number changed. It dropped, but in 2012, but there was still a shift. So the more often they are allowed, those who hold the political clout in their state house, the more often they are allowed to change the playing surface, the playing levels, the lines of where a district is, the more often they're going to be in control and in power. And understand this: power equals money, and money can buy you power. I've always asked the question, which one is more important, money or power? My answer to that has always been power, because power can get you money, but money can't always get you power. You can be very, very rich, but it doesn't mean you can get an undue advantage to go your way. But if you got power, those with money will want to hook their wagon to your wagon to get that undue advantage. So as we talk about the gerrymandering and the effects of it and the distortions, new party lines, for example, here's an example that Republican lawmakers drew new district lines in North Carolina and Pennsylvania to get an undue advantage. 2012, Democrats won more seats than Republicans, but they won only 9 of the 31 seats. So you can have an advantage, but still be at a disadvantage. So those things continue to go forward, and it's not just in states in the South, but New Jersey had this happen. California had this happen. You see the voting changing. You see that when you change these lines, things, you once you were in this district, the line changed. So now oftentimes some people have even lost their seats because the lines changed. Your area got absorbed in the line changing, and then that changed. The PBS NewsHour in 2021 did a report on gerrymandering, and they stated a gerrymandered state, it's not unusual to see towns carved in half and shared school districts split into different political districts. This is, as they state, not accidental. The redistricting process has long been conducted behind closed doors. Now, when we talk about politics, we want to always hope there be some transparency, but as just stated, things done behind closed doors. I asked a city council representative one time, had he ever gone to the meeting after the meeting? And what I meant by that was, you have the city council meeting, and then there might be another meeting, say, in another room, or maybe at a restaurant. Folks might get together and talk about some things, but that's not the meeting I was talking about. After the structured meeting, city council meeting, and after that meeting, right after that, I'm talking about the meeting after that meeting. And what I was referencing was that meeting that many times happens at a very private location. For instance, the country club, quote unquote, country club facility, where people have memberships. And unless you have a membership to be in that setting, you can't get in. That meeting is conducted after, or sometimes before or after, some of the meetings that you may be going to publicly. And I asked him, had he ever been to the meeting after the meeting? And of course, he told me no. And my response to him was, and you never will attend that meeting, the meeting after the meeting, when they have that very, very private meeting. As they say, redistricting process happening behind closed doors. And they stated that under the watchful eye of the very politicians hoping to tip voting lines in their favor. Some states decided to find a way to deter this type of action. One state, Michigan, did that and found a way to minimize, eliminate these closed door practices. States have a wide variety of latitude, but in 2010, a growing number of states, including Michigan, created an independent commission, which was designed to take the process out of the hands of the politicians. We're not going to let you draw these lines anymore, politicians. We're going to let the citizens, we the people, will draw the lines. Michigan is a deeply divided political state. So this radical experiment created more fair legislative districts. And this commission had a balance where it allowed 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans, and 5 unaffiliated voters to become the Michigan Independent Citizen Redistricting Commission. We the people now will determine how the pie is sliced up. Those of you who sit in the House and Senate of the Michigan state, you're not going to decide this anymore. So, once upon a time when, as it states, the Republicans were, as they say, you ever heard of someone saying they put their thumb on the scale to tip things their way? These people have made a difference in how Michigan is divided and how people will vote. Now, understand that the line between urban and rural America kind of divides, or sort of divides itself along political lines. Urban areas, more Democratic. Suburban and rural areas, more Republicans. But in their report, they said that the urban-rural divide does not explain some of the oddly drawn maps of some of this redistricting. It doesn't bear out what's going on. Following the 2010 census, legislators separated the city of Farmington, Michigan, from the surrounding community of Farmington Hills, Michigan. putting Farmington in a different congressional district, even though the two communities still sent their kids to the same schools. One community, we're going to cut it up. Our kids can go to the same school, but we can't vote as one community. On the map, Farmington looks like a mushroom-shaped blob, carved out of the 14th and added to the 11th. Following the 2010 census, legislators separated the city of Farmington. So this is what happens when gerrymandering and redistricting happens. People put it in the hands of how they want it. That's why this commission was formed, so that this wouldn't happen any further. We're not going to do this anymore. We're going to avoid this from happening. So understand that in this time of voting and getting things in order to put us back in a democracy state and not move to an autocracy state, as some individuals would prefer, and those people who choose to follow those individuals who are, let's say, leaning toward autocracy, don't understand that you may think it will benefit you now, but understand this: those in power, they don't care about those who don't have what they have, the haves and the have-nots. You don't have, you helped us get in, you helped us change things. Now we're going to fix it so that we can be in office forever. And then we don't need you anymore. And then we can treat you like we treat those other people who don't have or who we wanted to keep out. So be mindful. Those of you who are thinking that you're doing yourself a big favor being in the autocratic mindset of those politicians who want things to be their way, you will be left out. Democracy is a beautiful thing. It's not always 100% accurate and works for the good of everyone, but a bad democratic or democracy day is far better than a 100% good autocracy day. When you lose your rights, when you lose things, when things are taken away from you, you worry about what's being taken away from you now. Turn this country into an autocratic society and watch who loses even more. Good morning. This is the Kitchings Table here on WBIS LP 106.9 FM, YouTube, Roku, GPAC 23, and Facebook Live are the other platforms you can catch us. If you aren't tuning in, we're always glad to be with you every Tuesday morning here to give you our take on things going on around this country and around the world when we can. And today our topic is to the polls, the importance of understanding gerrymandering and the importance of what's going to happen when we don't take care of our own communities as we should. As diverse as this country is, the beauty of the diversity is that it's under what we say, we the people. Everybody, not just for a few, not just for the chosen, not just for those who have the power and the wealth. That's not what this country was built on. It was built on equality for all. But we're being challenged. And this is not a good time to be playing hardball with some of these people who want to change the landscape in this country. So, as we talk about our pantry section of our show today, it is titled The Urban versus Rural Divide. Urban versus rural. This is and will continue to be one of the most detrimental things and ways for politics to be decided in America, no matter how much gerrymandering or not is done. This divide, the rural versus the urban. And please understand that suburban is tied to the rural part of the fence. So on one side you got urban, the other side you got rural. Inner cities, major cities, metropolitan areas, pretty much urban. Outlying communities and those areas that are considered our farming communities, those are the communities under the rural umbrella. So just so you understand where the line is and how this is going to affect things going forward, as it already has in past years, but especially over the last 5 or 6 years, it's become even more detrimental. And if you don't understand the battle that's being fought right now and the battles it's causing, the little skirmishes in outlying areas, and those people who want to be in power want to convince you that their way is the best way, no matter whether they're telling you the truth or not, please keep in mind that when folks don't want you to know what's really going on, it's so they can gain an advantage. If I tell you things that, as they call it, misinformation or alternative facts, that's so I can gain an advantage. Keep you in the dark, I gain the advantage. You're enlightened, you can read, you can see things, you know things. Not too much they can do to sway you or discount who you are and what you're doing. So keep in mind that as long as you stay in tune, in touch, and educated and informed, no one can take advantage of you. As we've all said in the past, knowledge cannot be taken away from you once you have gained it. That's something that no one can take away from you. What you know can't be taken. So I want to bring you this story, and it is a true story, to understand what's going on in this country and what has happened over the years based on people wanting to get an advantage, a distinct advantage, why they want the advantage, and what lengths they will go to get the advantage so they can stay in power and control most, if not all, of what's going on when it comes to political gains or political issues. So in the United States, local government, a consolidated city-county government is formed when one or more cities and the surrounding counties merge into one unified jurisdiction. A consolidated government is when a city and a county come together and merge into one unified jurisdiction. So you take municipal and county governments and put them all together into one, making it one big government. This happened because living through what happened in 1968 here in my hometown, Jacksonville, Florida, I used to think that it was for a different reason that this change came about, because the mayor at the time had aspirations for being the governor. And if martial law ever came down on Jacksonville, martial law, the governor now has power over that city, not the mayor. Martial law, the governor would then take control. So to manipulate the system, 50 years ago, the urban core of a city, Jacksonville, was changing its voting numbers more towards a balance or imbalance for voters of color. So the design and decision was made to consolidate city and county government into one big city, causing the numbers to change for those of non-color to dominate and win most elections and representative seats moving forward. So as the urban core was gaining power and strength for people of color, those who saw this change on the horizon felt they needed to do something. So what did they take on? Let's consolidate the government. The marketing hook was to make the electorate believe that becoming the largest city in America by land mass, not by population, was a big deal, and it would cause recognition of the city to overshadow the likes of New York City, Chicago, and Los Angeles when you mention it by saying that it's the largest city in the United States. From an area perspective, not from a population perspective. At the time this happened in 1968, the population of Jacksonville, Florida was around 500,000 people, 500,000 citizens and voters. But the optics that they created would make you think it was much larger. And as I stated, the genius of a plan formulated by the mayor and members of the city council, along with those power brokers and business individuals who wanted to ensure that their political clout would always favor their particular needs and desires forever. This was what was on the table. To give you a little bit more background to this, here's what I found when I Googled this online. The development of suburbs and a subsequent wave of white flight, which means Caucasian Americans leaving the urban core to move to the suburbs. Ironically, that same flight is now wanting to move back into the urban area, moving to neighborhoods, building more apartments, townhomes in the urban core. They're wanting to move back. But during this time, they left Jacksonville with a much poorer population than before. Much of the city's tax base dissipated, leading to problems with funding education, sanitation, and traffic control within the city limits. So, you have city government, county government. You have police head, police in the city, sheriff in the county. Police in the city, sheriff in the county. Now, at this time in Jacksonville, it's not called the Jacksonville Police Department. It's the biggest city. However, they umbrellaed it under the county so that it goes to all corners. So it's called the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. In addition, residents in unincorporated suburbs had difficulty obtaining municipal services. People who lived in the suburbs didn't have the services that people who lived within the city limits had, such as sewage and building code enforcement. In 1958, a study recommended that the city of Jacksonville begin annexing outlying communities in order to create the needed tax base to improve services throughout the county. There's a need. This is what we need to do. Voters outside the city limits rejected annexation plans in 6 referendums between 1960 and 65. People outside the city voted it down. However, in the mid-60s, corruption scandals began to rise among many of the city officials. Corruption scandals, who were mainly elected through the traditional good old boy name I do apologize for that technical glitch. But getting back to the point about consolidation, as I stated, in the city of Jacksonville, they consolidated city and county government after there were corruption scandals and people were indicted and some people had to resign. I mean, it was truly a mess. So the mayor at that time got with some other people and decided, well, let's consolidate the city. So they did that. It went to the vote of the people. The people voted, yes, let's do it finally, after denying this opportunity 6 times. And it became Jacksonville / Duval County, all one big thing. The moniker that they put out when they created this new consolidated government was the bold new city of the South. That moniker continues to live on to this day on the emblem of the police or the sheriff's office logos on police cars. And it says the bold new city of the South. It has transitioned. However, there's still work to do, but life goes forward. So when there wants to be a different type of gerrymandering, there was this consolidation thing. Gerrymandering all the same, changing district lines, changing things to suit one over the other. Today, there are 3,069 county governments in the United States. 35 of these, which is roughly about 1%, are consolidated. The others are de facto consolidations, obtaining their status through the elimination of one or more cities. So, of the 19 communities that have consolidation, most of them are in the South. However, 4 are in Alaska, but 4 are in Virginia and Georgia. So I wanted to give you a list of those cities and their counties and states where we have this consolidation. And understand that specifically in Virginia, like in Jacksonville, the metro area is, considered in Virginia, it encompasses basically 4 different areas to make up one metro area. And in Virginia, they call it the Tidewater area. So the Tidewater area consists of Newport News, Portsmouth, Chesapeake, Virginia Beach, and Norfolk. The Tidewater area. So here's a list of places that are consolidated in America. New Orleans, Nantucket, Massachusetts, Suffolk, Massachusetts, Philadelphia, San Francisco, New York, which contains 5 boroughs. So 5 boroughs have 5 individual areas, but they all comprise the city of New York. Denver, Honolulu, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and then we get to Virginia. So Elizabeth City County was no longer exists, and it emerged into the area of Hampton. Now, Hampton has 137,000 plus citizens. Newport News, 187,000. Chesapeake, Norfolk. Combined, they make up 486,000, right at 887,000 citizens. And then Virginia Beach, which has 450,000. So when you add those 4 areas together, it gives you about 1.5 million citizens. Then Nashville, Tennessee. Then we get to Jacksonville. So Virginia between 1952 and 1962 went through this consolidation phase. 1962 in Nashville, they consolidated. 1967 in Jacksonville saw Jacksonville consolidate. Today's Jacksonville population is 976,000 and some change, but in Metro Jacksonville, 1.3 million, and is considered the 12th largest city in America. So in Alaska, you got Juneau, Carson City, Nevada, Indianapolis, Indiana, Columbus, Georgia, Sitka, Alaska, Lexington, Kentucky, Suffolk, Virginia, which we already spoke about, Anchorage, Anaconda, Montana, Butte, Montana, Homo Parish in Louisiana, Lynchburg in Tennessee, Athens, Georgia, Lafayette, Louisiana, Augusta, Georgia, Kansas City, Kansas, another city in Trousdale, Tennessee, Haynesboro in Alaska, Cusseta, which is Chattahoochee County in Georgia, and then finally Louisville, Kentucky. So the last two consolidated in 2003. So again, the consolidated cities are when they take city, county, merge the two together. All services are under one umbrella so that they can move that tax base to broaden it out, get more services and more bang for the buck. So this is what has happened in these areas. So county governments are still not as prevalent as metro or city governments, but consolidated governments, 35 of them, and the four places where you see them the most are Alaska, Virginia, and Georgia. So, and I think probably the largest consolidated, well, when you say San Francisco, Philadelphia, New York, Denver, they probably don't look as consolidated as the states that may be in the South. I mean, it's probably a difference. But New York City, San Francisco, major metropolitan cities, they probably do things at a different angle than what you'll see in the South. But irregardless, that consolidation expands the tax base, expands the voting opportunities for the citizens who live in those areas, which can be an advantage. Hopefully, it doesn't put the communities at a disadvantage. Hopefully, those communities in the urban core of those places aren't put at a disadvantage, so that it can be a growth for everyone to benefit from all the things necessary. But again, be mindful of the fact that when these things happen, changes occur. And immediate change may not be good. Long-term change might be better. So you just have to kind of wait and see. But we'll see as we get ready for this, the finality of the elections in 2022. And as we prepare for the next election cycle of 2024, with the presidential race on the horizon, and as things are moving now, if federal government, law enforcement arm, the Department of Justice, continues to move that needle toward all the information to show that there were some improprieties done by the former president, don't expect him to be on the ballot. That's just my take, but it looks as though things are moving in that direction. And it will come down to whether or not that individual gets indicted subpoenaed, then indicted. If that happens, of course, you cannot run for office if you have a felony, a federal felony. You cannot run for a federal office ever. So in addition to what's going on from that perspective, the state of New York, the state of Georgia, they're all poised and ready to have these legal aspects taken into account. So that's going to do it for me today on our show, which was titled To the Polls, Gerrymandering and the Rural and Urban Divide here in the United States. Hopefully you have gotten some information and gotten to know what is important to you. We hope that you will join us next Tuesday here on the Kitchings Table. I'm Earl Kitchings, and always glad to be with you on Tuesday mornings. For me, the staff of WBIS LP 106.9 FM, we thank you. Remember, COVID is still with us. Stay safe. Get your shots. Get your boosters. And remember that new disease on the horizon, monkeypox, is just waiting to be the next epidemic/pandemic. So please stay safe, but please stay positive and stay informed. Until next Tuesday, Earl Kitchings saying so long. Bye-bye. Have a great week.